Hello there, guys. Welcome back to another episode of E&Ftv. Today, we're joined by the amazing Sarah Duncan, who is the founder of Sleeping Lion. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's been one that I've been really keen to get in the diary, to be fair, ever since I actually watched a debate, if not grudge match, between you and another very good friend of mine on a program that was created by Hosper. And I remember messaging you almost immediately afterwards or the next day saying, can we have a chat? so I've been really looking forward to this one. And thank you so much, because I know obviously you've got a busy diary, so thank you for carving some time out to join us today. How we like to start the show is basically hearing a bit about you, the guest, a bit about your background, obviously what brought you to start your own business, and I suppose more importantly, what that business now provides its clients. So I suppose, Sarah, please take it away.
Brilliant, thank you. So my background is hospitality. I started off, well, actually it was a complete fluke. So a mate of mine from school got a job at Claridge's, which was then part of the Savoy Group. And I thought, that looks quite nice. And I'd been looking at various things and I thought, yeah, hotel sales, that sounds like quite a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
So I asked her to hook me up with the sales manager at Claridge's, who was then the lovely Jackie Cow. And I went in for a chat and a cup of tea, and I came out with a job, which was amazing. So I joined Claridge's and I started off as the sort of sales secretary. Although I think probably if you ask them, they'd probably tell you I wasn't a very good secretary. So probably because of that, I soon became sales exec and then banqueting sales manager.
Right.
So that was my sort of hotel background. Then I moved into quite a long period of time working in membership and membership marketing and sales. So I did the opening of a posh dining club in the city. And then I was headhunted and moved to Vietnam, which was a bit weird in 1995.
Sure.
To do a club launch in Hanoi. And so I worked there, and then I moved and worked in Singapore, and then to spa development, living in Bali, which was lovely.
Yeah.
So fast forward, came back to the UK in the early 2000s and did a couple of things before setting up Sleeping Lion in 2005.
Okay.
So that was all about marketing advice and business development.
Sure.
So I did that for, well, I still do that, but probably around about 2018, I suppose you could say I had my little personal epiphany where I just became aware of some of my clients or potential clients, in my opinion, starting to potentially jump on this sustainability bandwagon.
Right, okay.
And so I was seeing what I thought was some quite token behaviour. I would now call it symbolic corporate environmentalism.
Wow.
I know.
Is that just a posh term for box ticking? Is that what that is?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
token
okay,
behaviour.
fine.
So yeah.
That's my typical northern way of looking at it.
So I saw a lot of companies, and you know the kind of thing. So somebody making a big song and dance about banning plastic straws, whilst not looking at anything else in the supply chain and all the other single-use plastics, or you know, doing great things, maybe charitable stuff, or even giving away, you know, planting a tree, let's say, for every meal served, but actually hiding quite a toxic bullying culture that didn't always tally with all this great stuff we're doing at the front. So I started to challenge clients and potential clients, which didn't always go down very well.
No.
But I started to challenge, and I also then started to read a lot of books around sustainability and business ethics. I studied a bit with Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership.
Okay.
And all of that sort of came together, and I ended up writing the ethical business book, which is my
Ta-da!
um, and that is basically we've talked about this a little bit before, but it's all the best stuff that I learned and read.
Yeah.
All the best bits I thought, I put it all into a book. And so now, because I've got the book, I still have Sleeping Lion, I still do all my consultancy work, but I do it now with an ethical and sustainable hat on.
Sure. Well, I mean, while we mentioned it, I was going to bring this up later on, but first off, thank you very much for sending this over. It was brilliant. And one thing I noticed that I mentioned to you a moment ago was that, you know, I'm not somebody that dedicates time to reading a book. I'm just not. What was brilliant about this is it very much, and I know I said this to you a moment ago, but it's very much sort of like a tick box. You can pop your yes and no. Have I done this? Have I done that? You can pop in some notes into certain areas, and you can very much jump into it where you need to, and then jump back out, and then crack on with what you needed to do. Which is something that I respond to really well. So that's sort of just for me, but for anybody that is interested, obviously, in taking a look and all the rest of it, it is one of these things that you can jump into, you can jump out of, you can use it like a guide. Well, it even says it on the front, right? Yeah, non-preachy guide. That is exactly what it is, and it is punchy and it is to the point. So there's no waffle. And you know, we'll pop a link in the description below to get the first edition from Amazon. And then the second edition, we're going to pop a link to the publishers sort of directly, or they can drop you a message and I'll pop your details in the link below as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. But yeah, that's the whole thing is that there's a lot of books out there, and a lot of them are quite single issue. So they're very highly environmental or energy focused, or one thing or another, or they're really quite academic. And
yes,
I think business is about cutting through all of that, and what do I need to know and how can I enact it?
Yeah, and I completely agree. And as I say, from somebody that responds very well to that, that is exactly what ticks my boxes, if you like, is just being able to look at it, get the information I need, act on it, and then come back to it when I need it for another purpose. I suppose, you know, one of the biggest things that's changed within sort of your life is, of course, starting Sleeping Lion. What is it exactly that Sleeping Lion does for its clients? You know, how do you approach things? What is it that you bring in terms of your client base and your expertise?
Yeah, so I've been in business now for over 30 years. I've worked overseas. I've worked a lot in hospitality, but having been self-employed, I've worked with many different sectors. I would say normally it's small to medium-sized businesses.
Okay.
And it's the sort of businesses that I can go in there and say, what are your biggest issues at the moment? And how can I help with those? And they're normally with a marketing focus on them. So essentially, and this is what's sort of ironic about this conversation today, is that for years I have been helping businesses to develop and to maximize their revenue.
We'll come on to that.
So you know, that's what I do, is I go in and I help businesses look at how they can make more money. But I now do it in a very different way than I used to, because I now do it with an ethical and sustainable hat on. And that changes things.
Yes, and this is exactly why I sort of contacted you, as I said at the start. So I obviously watched you on another discussion, going head to head with somebody that I know very well, and you know, the discussion was compelling. I felt the need to contact you because I thought this was a discussion that very much so I needed to have. And I think a lot of people in my audience, as anybody knows if they've been watching this series, it is sort of originally focused towards revenue management, and I suppose I have a bias towards it because, of course, that's where I specialize. But you made some incredible points that I thought were massively valid and something that people are not talking about. So I suppose in terms of, you know, what it is that you do in terms of the ethics side of things, you know, talking to people about sustainability, what's your problem with revenue management? What's the issue? I've got a bone to pick with you here.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. When you put the whole kind of ethics and sustainable hat on, a lot of what we do is we look at, I suppose, redefining what success looks like. And a lot of it is this balancing of what we call the triple bottom line. And that is profit, people, and planet.
Okay.
And so this is the way that businesses now say, okay, yes, we need to make profit. Profit's not a bad thing, but we need to do it not at the expense of people and not at the expense of the environment and the planet.
Sure.
So it's about balancing those things and saying we want to make money, but we want to protect the planet. We want to protect people.
Yeah.
Now, when I look at some of the revenue management tactics, it is difficult to be able to see how they benefit anything other than the bottom line.
Okay.
That they are not just merely focused on pure profit. Now, forget the environmental side because that's sort of different, but let's just look at people and let's look at customers.
Okay.
When I look at some of the revenue management tactics, I wonder how they benefit the customer.
Okay.
Is there any... where my problem starts.
I suppose my question, and probably the question of the audience, would probably be what tactics in particular? Is there a couple that immediately spring to mind that
Yeah.
I know I can think of a couple, but yeah.
So I touched on these in the Hosper thing, but so my two that I'm going to highlight: fluid pricing.
Okay.
I have an issue with. I have an even bigger issue with overbooking. I'll come on to that in a moment. Okay. So fluid pricing. This is one of those that, again, I'm putting my customer hat on here. Okay. And there is something just inherently confusing about pricing in hotels for the consumer.
Sure.
And it's that whole thing of I walk into the hotel and what's the person next to me paying? And the likelihood is it's going to be different from me. And my question is why? Sure. Why are they paying a different rate? I understand from the business side of it why, but from the consumer point of view, it's really difficult to justify. Yeah. And it's not because customers are stupid. They're not. Customers understand the whole kind of supply and demand. They understand tactical pricing, and that sometimes you have to pay more for something. Yeah. You know, Christmas decorations in December rather than January. Sure. There are times in the year, there are circumstances whereby a customer will pay a different amount for something. Another example, which I often use is, today I'm going to use, I know as a customer that it's going to cost me more money to go and see Robbie Williams than it is to go and see the Upminster all-male choir. Okay. Because Robbie Williams has more fans than your Upminster all-male choir. God bless them.
I was going to say, as good as they are, of course.
And there will be many people who love them, but not as many that love Robbie Williams. And therefore, I understand I'm going to have to pay more. But all of those things, they're quite sort of binary, they're overt. I understand it. Whereas with hotel pricing, and of course airlines, hotels aren't the only ones, but with hotel pricing, I don't understand. Sure. It feels like a dark art. I don't know whether it's a person that's penalising me, an algorithm that's penalising me. I don't know why I'm being treated differently from somebody else. Sure. And I think it's that whole lack of transparency that breeds distrust. Sure. And that seems to be going against the whole mood of business right now. Business is now saying, you know, we've got to be open, we've got to be transparent. Trust is a big word, particularly as we come out of this pandemic. And I just think any practices that feel murky are maybe ill-advised.
I suppose in terms of, the focus for any revenue manager, they're of course directed in a very specific way in terms of what your focus is, and that is to obviously maximize revenue. I suppose in terms of the sort of discipline, I had a very good friend of mine in the industry who sort of quoted this, and this was very much a revenue management is a discipline without discipline. Which I thought was fantastic. I thought what a cowboy sort of statement to make about such a profession that is so direct and so specific in what they do.
It's
But in
great
a
for
lot of ways,
Mavericks.
yeah, exactly that. But it does work so well, and I suppose businesses have people that focus on their ethical side and their sustainability and so on, and they'll have people that focus on revenue management, and that's obviously what their sole job is. I suppose where my question was, and when we first spoke, was where does it end? Where does an employer stop in terms of maximizing that revenue? Where do they stop in terms of those dark arts, as you put it? Where does that end, and when do we hit that sustainability mark? Because again, it's a problem. And again, I think a lot of people in my audience will be like, why the hell is he talking about this? But I do believe, somebody in the industry, I need to hear all sides of it, and this is absolutely true. Either way, at some point we're going to hit that brick wall, and if we're not in front of it, we're going to slam straight into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm surprised there isn't more talked about actually on this, because anything that doesn't appear to be transparent and is mistrusted, we are getting more and more consumer action about. So I'm surprised it doesn't get talked about more. I think there are, and I'm learning, there are good revenue managers and there are bad ones. And I think there are ones that stick within the parameters of savvy business tactics. And there are ones that step outside of it for pure greed and profit. And I can't really tell you where that line is. I suppose it's whether or not you can sleep at night. But I still think that some of these tactics could be rethought.
Yes.
I still think, there's amazing people working in revenue, really smart people doing really smart things. And I guess my thing is, how can we use all those smart brains to actually come up with some smart business practices that are more transparent and more ethical, and also, more equal. We talk a lot in business at the moment, in the world at the moment, about diversity, inclusion, equality. These practices are anything but equal when it comes to this flexible pricing. So I think that's something that we should be having a more open conversation about.
Yes.
The other one, the elephant also in the room here, is the online travel agents.
Yeah.
And a lot of hotel people say to me, oh, it's not us, it's the OTAs. They're the ones that have driven all this. Like, well,
passing the buck.
Exactly. They're the villains, not us. And it's like, no, the minute you offered them a rate, you became complicit in it. So if that's the problem, then the industry should be looking at how to tackle that problem and learn, I think, from the online travel agents, because funnily enough, a lot of the way the online travel agents do things is a lot more customer friendly.
Yeah.
Ironically.
It's true. It's true. I think it's one of these things as well where, I mean, I've spoken about this on a number of occasions already. So for anybody watching this, you would have heard this before. But the revenue manager, the role of the revenue manager is becoming a wider commercial role anyway. And I think if they are looking, I suppose, at the wider business growth, the sustainability of the business itself, if they're not focused on the ethics behind it, there is going to be a situation, and a revenue manager is all about forecasting. They will see that wall coming. And I think if they're good at what they do, they will be communicating this with their general managers, their operators, their MDs, their CEOs, because if they're not, it's like something we spoke about before we did this today, was there's no downside There's literally no downside to be more ethical and more sustainable. Yeah, okay, you might not be able to get some of those profit margins as high as you get them right now, but in the long run, when this does, and it will come to light, and people will have a problem with it, and people will start complaining about it, and you will start seeing it in the media. If you're a brand that's already in front of it, and you can say quite clearly, we saw this coming, we dealt with it, we understood it, and we're treating our customers, as you say, fairly, equally, and we're doing it in a sustainable and ethical way, I can't see any downside whatsoever.
No, and that's the thing. And, you know, we get a bit hung up on how broad sustainability is. And it's very broad and complex.
Yeah.
But let's strip it back down. Sustainability means the ability to exist in the future.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
So anything you're doing focused on sustainability is about ensuring that you're still around in the years to come, thriving, succeeding, doing all the things, being resilient in the years to come. And so a lot of these tactics, they are tactics, it's not a strategy. A lot of these tactics are aimed at short-term profit rather than long-term customer loyalty. And I think that's the big thing, is if you can look at if you think about what you're doing and say, right, am I prioritizing short-term profit over long-term customer loyalty, then that's not sustainable.
No.
So those are conversations I think that we should be having, because we can, you know, we can fix all this. We can make things more transparent. We can innovate in the industry. We can educate customers to book direct if we really all put our minds to it, rather than just saying it's too big, so let's just tactically manipulate things on a day-to-day basis to get the most out of every day. Feels very kind of it feels very short term to me.
Also feels quite exhausting.
Yeah, you know? Absolutely. It's like a hamster wheel, isn't it?
So it's one of those things where, you know, from that perspective, and again, we could look at implementing some sort of tech solution that would then alleviate more man hours and so on and so forth, therefore bringing down overall costs. I mean, you know, there's loads of different things that could be done on the back of these discussions. And I suppose, obviously, we've already discussed about what hoteliers should be worried about with this situation. And those things are pretty clear. I don't know if you wanted to add any more to them, but I suppose, what would you say would be really good ways of going forward, avoiding this, you know, this transparency, this sustainability focus? What needs to start? I mean, the initial one, as we've already said, communication with your commercial teams, with your operational teams, and so on and so forth, and whatever.
Communication, education, innovation. Before I come on to that, I just wanted to say, you know, the other one that does bear mentioning, I'll be brief. The fluid pricing, I think there are, you know, it's a nuanced argument.
Yeah.
Overbooking.
You did say that.
Overbooking. That one, to me, there is no justification for anymore. And I know that people will argue with me and say that you sometimes have trouble when there's no shows getting money from people. To me, there is no situation where now, in this day and age, that a person doesn't arrive or doesn't arrive at a hotel on a specific day and that hotel doesn't have their credit card details.
Yes. Yeah.
If they don't show, they should pay 100%. Just like my Robbie Williams gig. If somebody decides on the day they don't fancy going to see Robbie Williams for whatever reason, they don't say, yeah, didn't fancy it, can I have my money back, please?
Sure.
They know not to. They know that's not how it works. So for me, we have to get to a point where everybody accepts that if they don't show up at a hotel, they get charged 100%.
Sure.
Then if you've filled every room as a revenue manager, you got 100% of your revenue.
Yeah.
You do not have to run the risk of walking people.
Sure.
Because that practice is purely just down to, can I get more money than actually my 100%?
Yeah, it's one of these things as well. As you said, in the times that we find ourselves in, we've seen a huge transition for restaurants as a standard, taking 20 £20 deposits here, or a certain percentage of a deposit that is non-refundable if you don't turn up, for a very clear reason. Whereas before, that was very unusual. It was usually when you were booking somewhere incredibly nice or whatever. Whereas now it's a pretty much a standard at any restaurant. For the last three that I've booked, it's either been a £10 or £20 deposit that is non-refundable.
And this
And
is
I,
what's
yeah,
interesting. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
sorry, this is what I get kind of excited about. We can change how
mm,
customers behave. And,
yeah,
the best example I can give you of this, that I read recently. Now, this is a combination of education and incentivizing, but plastic bag use in
hmm,
markets.
yeah,
Okay. Since the levy was brought in, where we had to pay a little bit for a plastic bag in a supermarket, the average person now purchases 4 plastic bags a year.
wow,
In 2014, the average was 140 bags that we were using.
wow, right,
So that bit of incentivizing by, in this way, putting a levy on it,
hmm,
plus educating people about the damage of plastic bags, has
yeah,
changed our behavior
yeah,
to the extent of going from 140 bags a year to 4.
yeah.
That's that kind of nudge thing. So it is possible to change how consumers behave.
Yeah, completely. And again, it's one of these things where we're in a time where things are changing, where positive change can happen, and there is an opportunity. I mean, we've seen on a number of different fronts in terms of the hospitality industry where it would have been incredibly sluggish to change and it wouldn't have moved, and as a necessity, it's had to. But we have an opportunity right now as hoteliers and so on and so forth to be able to say, well, this is our opportunity to make this change. It's something that we've been thinking about. It's something that we've seen. We can now implement it because we're in a market where change is happening all over the place, and not even just huge change over long periods of time. These are changes every single week. Processes,
Yeah.
focuses, customer experience focuses in terms of adding value rather than dumping prices. We've seen all this. And yeah, and this is one of the biggest reasons why I thought this discussion was so important, because one, I'd never seen a discussion like I had with that hosper sort of online event. um and two, I think with my focus on revenue management, my audience, and of course the hoteliers that do sort of tune in as well, this is such a wake up call and an opportunity to, I suppose, start that road or start that journey to make that change. Because as we've said before, this is going to reach a tipping point. And if you're not ready, you're already losing. And if you've got all these other brands that are pushing that sustainability, pushing that ethical way of working, they can then sit there and revel and celebrate because they've already got in front of it. They've already been treating their customers fairly, treating them equally, and overall putting less pressure on their people in the business, and being focused on the business as a whole rather than that top line.
And that's the other part of this. It's yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to ethical revenue management, which I'd love, I think there's lots more to sort of talk about and put in sort of codes of conduct and things within the
Yeah,
industry. But I think it's going back to that question is do we have the customer at the forefront of these decisions?
sure.
And it's not just the customer, actually, it's employees as well, because
Hmm.
we're quite often putting employees in difficult situations, whether that's having to walk people or having to have that slightly uncomfortable conversation about the rates they're paying.
Yeah.
We are potentially leaving our employees in difficult situations. So
Hmm.
I think we just need to, I go back to that kind of people, planet, profit.
Yes.
Maybe we can't save the planet here, but we can balance up the profit and people
Yeah.
dynamic, I think. And I think, what seemed to be fine and reasonable, tactically savvy behavior
Mm,
in the past, I think we may just wake up one day and realize it's not being tolerated in quite the same way.
yeah. And I suppose that
Yeah,
is
getting ahead of it.
Well, that is and again, I spoke about this a moment ago, but that is the main worry. I mean, what should hoteliers be worried about then? So if they don't, okay, let's say they sit on their hands, let's say they watch this and go, nah, whatever. What's to come?
Okay. I just think you look at the trends. You look at the trends in business around sustainability, but you
Yeah.
also look at generational dynamics. We've
Okay.
got a lot of talk around millennials and, excuse me, Gen Z,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
younger generations who, frankly, are showing to care a lot more about businesses doing the right thing than we did.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, sorry, me.
Yeah.
And I think, we could sleepwalk into something here by realizing they reckon by 2025, 75% of the workforce will be millennials and Gen Z.
Right.
So that's the workforce, that's your employees, but that's also the spending power getting bigger and bigger. And this group of people cares about businesses doing the right thing.
Yes.
And not hiding stuff. Okay. None of that token stuff, none of my symbolic corporate environmentalism. They want to know. They want you to be honest and transparent with them.
Sure.
That's the growing dynamic. So that's the warning, I guess, is don't look at this conversation from what's happened in the past. Look at the consumer and the employee of the future. Yes. And think about how things need to be refreshed in order to roll with that. Because we can't just keep doing things the old way, because that's the way it's always been done.
No, it just doesn't work. It's not suitable for the times, right?
So specifically, I would just if I were a business, I'd just stop overbooking, full stop. Put in rigid cancellation policies, educate customers on it, and just ditch that as a practice. And then with pricing, I'd just be more thoughtful about it. Engage some customers, maybe do some forums, find out what really, really upsets customers and how, as a business, you can address it, and also how you can have a more direct dialogue with customers. And if OTAs are a problem, then have a specific strategy to deal with OTAs.
Sure.
Don't just have them as it's a thing we just have to deal with.
Yeah. And again, it's one of these things I've always sort of thought this and practiced this, that if you do have complete open transparency, you are completely honest, you set out that sort of signposting at the very start of whatever you're doing, there's no disappointment. There's no what does that mean? What does this mean? What do you mean I'm not getting my money back? As long as you've got that very clearly at the start, and these are the reasons why, a customer can then make a well-informed decision as to whether they click that button to say, yeah, I want it, or they say, I'll think about it some more, or I'll talk to the other half, or whatever it is, and then they make that decision. And then when you get to that point where they're thinking, oh, we can't go anymore, or this and the other, then it's on the balls in their court where they weigh up how important that trip is, or if they really do sort of want to, I suppose, sacrifice the money they've spent. But that's not on your head. That's on them.
So you've just been. I mean, it's also, unfortunately, like I said earlier, I think hotels do have to learn a bit from OTAs, and there's that. It's the balance, because the good thing with a lot of OTAs is that you can book, and you can cancel quite close to the time, but you absolutely know that you will be charged if you go over that 48 hours.
Sure.
But there's a lot of flexibility leading up to that. Whereas with a lot of direct bookings, you don't have that flexibility.
No.
There's something that could be learnt there. But also, I still find it incredible. Even last week, I stayed a couple of nights in Oxford, and unfortunately, I went to book a hotel, and 2 or 3 I looked at, the hotel's website was more expensive than the OTA. And it's just such a shame, because I know that if I'd have called the hotel, they probably would have given me a better rate, but that's not user friendly.
No, you just want to be able to click it and go. Yeah.
We have to get the tech working for hotels and be as intuitive and as user friendly, I think. Focus on that. and coming up to the standards that the OTAs offer. But that's a whole other massive debate.
Well, again, I think it's one of these things where that's where the millennials and Gen Z are. They price comparison immediately. Anybody that's in that sort of segment immediately goes right. They'll price check it. They'll look at it, and if it's easy to just say book now, they'll press it. Very, very, very. I suppose little percentage would ever look at the sort of name of the hotel and then open up a separate page on their laptop or another device, or open up a separate page on their phone and then look to see if they've a better price. They just won't. They
won't do that. They certainly won't pick up the phone to say, can you match this rate? It's it's one click too many, and definitely a phone call too many. So that's the generation you're now marketing to.
Yeah.
So you've got to understand all these things. Now so look at the other things that they care about.
Yeah.
And this maybe is some of the environmental stuff. Maybe you introduce some incentives for booking direct with hotels, whereby it's not necessarily price related. It's value add, or it's environmental. It is a plant a tree, or some sort of paying it forward. It's something that combines those two things of, I'm having a great experience, but I feel as if I'm putting something back.
Yes. Yeah.
So there are ways, I think, that you can look at consumers and think what's important to them, and how can I tackle that?
Yeah, it comes down to the absolute basics of hospitality. Understand your customer, understand your guest. As soon as you've got that, you're in a much better place. Okay, well, again, I think from our discussion, there will be a lot of people that will have something to say, and I do encourage anybody that is watching this, that has got this far, look, pop a comment below. Tell us why overbooking is still something that should be practiced, or tell us why you believe fluid pricing is something that is a necessity still for hospitality. We'd love to hear it, and I know Sarah will probably have something to say, but we'd love to hear it. Sarah, obviously coming on to Sleeping Lion now, obviously more specifically, what's going on with you guys? Well, what developments have you got coming up? What projects, initiatives, anything going on at the moment?
Yeah, well, so thank you for mentioning the book. So that's just coming out in its second edition, which I'm delighted about, because it's a fast-moving topic. So I'm doing work with a number of people at the moment. If I'm being honest, I would love to work with more hospitality clients.
Click the link below, guys.
Hospitality has taken just a caning in the last 18 months. And quite understandably, there's a lot of kind of survival mentality out there at the moment still. But so some of the stuff that I talk about, the sustainability stuff, quite rightly has been put on the back burner. But if there are hotels out there, or organizations who are thinking, right, we're out of survival, we're now into long-term thinking, and that includes, how can we do this ethically? How can we do this sustainably? The build back better, as I think a lot of people are calling it. Then, get in touch, because I'd love to. I still have a massive affinity to hospitality. It's where I started, and bringing in a more sustainable, ethical way of doing things in hospitality would be the perfect collision for me. So. That's really where I'm up against. One other thing that I should mention, if there is anyone out there, it's in the book, but also on my blog, which is ethicalbusinessblog.com. I have a little questionnaire, and 40 questions, doesn't take very long. You can do it online, and it's all about really getting the conversation started around ethics and sustainability. I will send you a report back with your answers. I'll also do a little one-pager of things you might want to consider.
Sure.
But just to help people along on their journey. So if there's anyone interested in that, then it's a completely free resource. So
I'll pop that link. If you send me the link, I'll pop that link below as well. So anybody that is interested in that and filling out the questionnaire and getting that report back, again, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't, especially in times that we find ourselves in at the moment. So I'll pop that in the link below as well. But again, I think off the back of our discussion And of course, this, I'm already planning, as we've already discussed, to set up another discussion with a number of people on a panel, talking about a few different things. We may have a revenue person on there, and we'll see where that goes. But again, Sarah, I just want to say a massive thank you to you for taking the time out, but also genuinely raising this issue in my head, because it's not something that I'd been challenged with. And as I said, it was immediate for me. As soon as I watched it, I did jump off, as you know, and I couldn't help but message you. So you've tweaked something in me, and I'm hoping for anybody that is in the audience that watches this, that does get in contact with you, that does connect with you, that does build that dialogue, because it's something that I'm going to be pushing a lot more, and I hope to be working with you on a couple of different things going forward. But yeah, I just want to say a massive thank you to you.
Oh, thank you for indulging me.
Not a problem.
And I should just, before I sign off, I should say, by the way, I do really admire anyone in revenue management. I do think it's a really difficult place to be.
Yeah.
And I do think there's really, as I said earlier, some really smart people. Yeah. My thing is, I'd like to be working to bring all that smart energy into just a new way of approaching things.
Yeah. And again, there's no downside, not that we can see anyway. Guys, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today on this episode. It's been an absolute pleasure getting Sarah on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn and go over to the Instagram page, where we are incredibly active on who's coming up on the show.